Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick, and this is going to be the last in a three-part series of battling cancer. So, first one was LDN, low-dose naltrexone in cancer. Second one was cannabis in cancer, and this is going to be nutrition in cancer. So, if this is the first time you're finding me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the alert button to find out when I do new videos. So, the idea is that if you have been given a bad diagnosis of cancer, especially if it's pretty advanced, have no fear. Usually when the oncology team says there's nothing much to do, then patients will come and seek out other ways, and that's when I get my visitors. It would be nice to get in to see an integrative medicine doctor beforehand, but that's okay. So the idea would be to manifest the best healing you can get to. Or if you happen to be going through chemotherapy and you're trying to fine-tune the way you feel, the way you sleep, how appetite is, because it usually goes downhill when you're in chemotherapy, then I think a lot of the integrative medicine double-boarded doctors can figure out a process once they know who you are. So just for the basics, this is a cancer cell. This is a normal cell, but it's potentially turning into a cancerous cell. This is a white blood cell that's supposed to hunt down and destroy any cancer-looking cells. The problem with the white blood cell looking for bad cells or cells that have turned is that the white blood cell looks for weird messages on the surface, and sometimes a heat map or an inflammation area, and then the white blood cell hunts. Kind of like a bouncer or a police officer going to a rave. Don't have to find the one kid that's bad. You just have to know that there's a bunch of kids here. Okay, I'm going to hang out right here and wait till the kid presents himself. So sometimes cancers can be very, very clever because they originate as normal cells and something triggers them. And then when it gets triggered, the usual cycle of a cell duplicating, getting ready to duplicate, splitting, and then starting all over again, that's usually pretty slow. Like this. This is a cycle that all cells go through until, if you remember binary fission, the cell duplicates things, and then you get these little actin strings, and then it comes apart, and then it goes back. Then they have two holes again. Well, that's what happens with this cycle: G0 to G1 to S to G2 to M, and it's supposed to go slow. But in some cases, when a cancer cell is triggered, and it could be genetics, but honestly, it's not usually genetics. It's usually environmental factors, and that's why I want to talk to you about how you can prevent and how you can fight. But when it gets triggered, then this cycle gets really sped up fast and furious. And when it's fast and furious, that might seem like it's a problem because the cancer cells will grow quickly. But it's also their weakness, because when it's fast and furious, they usually ask for glucose. So I'll talk about that in a second. But what we want to do is slow it down. We want low and slow. And like before, when things go low and slow, then sometimes what will happen is then you'll go through the checkpoints that a cell normally has to cull the herd of bad cells. Fast and Furious gets around the checkpoints. So there are built-in mechanisms for cells to figure out which ones are going bad, also with the body and the white blood cells, which ones are going bad, and cause essentially a cell death. It's apoptosis. Sometimes in a different way, autophagy, but that's essentially when the cell has programmed death and it goes. So that's what we have to do when you have a cancer, is to get it to push over and die. But it's usually very, very clever. So I'm going to specifically talk about two types of cancers, and it's different for every type of cancer. Some grow fast, some go slow, some can be easily seen, some not. But glioblastoma multiforme is something in the brain. Very, very tough type of cancer because it morphs a lot. That's why they call it multiforme. It morphs, and then when you hit it with something, it morphs into something else. It's all in that family, though, and very quick to grow. There's also pancreatic cancer, which is a little bit elusive because it's deep in the belly, but by the time it's felt, it's usually metastasized to other areas, resulting in stage 4 diagnosis. So I still think that even if you're given, even if it's everywhere, there's still potential for you not even using the LDN or the the chemotherapy, the cannabis that I mentioned in my other 2 videos, just using food. So I guess I'll start there. The basic premise is if it's not genetic, it's environmental. And if it's environmental, what are the big things? Obesity is one. Bad food and bad diet is another. And the obesity can be from bad food, but obesity can be from stagnant behavior or sedentary life. Bad food and too much food. So there's also other things, tobacco and alcohol, but those usually should be obvious. Preservatives too, but that would be the bad food thing. So the idea would be, what can you do to figure out which foods will cause you to go into the cancer and which foods will save you from the cancer? And it's kind of obvious. And that's what Andy Weil and Donald Abrams have written in their book. They just had a lot of great examples of things you can do, whether you're fighting a cancer early or you're fighting a cancer in its later stages. I like, it's very easy to read if you are interested, and it's it has doctors telling you about conventional therapies and alternative complementary therapies. So a good reference if you're interested. And it talks about foods too. So that would be labeling organic. Is it worth it to do organic? Certain supplements that you can take to maybe increase your chances for antioxidation. Certain teas and food groups that might help speed up or facilitate healing. So it's avoiding the nasty, maybe trying the not so obvious, and then eating a healthy life. So I'm eating a healthy diet. So that's that part of healthy life. But if you've already been diagnosed, then one of the things that was written by Ornish is that it's very common finding that if you look at the studies, improper nutrition seems to be the hallmark of cancer, or at least basic building block for cancer. So his studies are great. So that is the reference if you want to look at it yourself. The only problem I find with the Ornish practice is that, but again, it works. The same principles that he uses to reverse heart disease and coronary artery narrowing are the same principles he uses to reverse prostate cancer in early stages in situ. So, I mean, if you have, and nowadays most most guys who have prostate cancer will go through active surveillance because the surgeries and the aggressive chemotherapies and radiation for your average prostate cancer don't really change the outcome. So they might get rid of the bulk tumor, but you'll still succumb at the same age as if you even didn't have surgery. So nowadays everybody just watches it. However, instead of just watching and waiting, because that's all active or surveillance title is we're just going to wait, check you every year, and when it comes up positive or starts to spread, then we'll hammer it, take everything out, give you impotence, give you incontinence, and we'll debulk the tumor. But again, I think there's things you can do while you're being surveilled, active surveillance. There's things you can do that will actually reverse. There's also, by justification, things you can do that will worsen. So if you continue with sedentary life, if you continue with highly processed foods, if you continue with, like what he says, meat. Now that's the only problem, is I like his associations, but this kind of diet's kind of tough. It's a vegetarian, low-fat diet. So that's what he what he does propose, but in addition to calming practice, exercise, yoga therapy, group therapy, but it is a bit tough. However, if I was fighting a prostate cancer that was being actively surveyed, I would do my best and make the changes. I know for a lot of you, I don't want to do vegetarian diet. It's not that hard. So I turned a vegan about 13 months ago. And I did it with a patient who had a heart attack here, and another heart attack just happened. Not in my office, but patient that didn't want to do a lot of things, kept on dealing with heart or joint pain, shoulder pain. I found out he had a heart attack today. He's alive, he's in his 40s, and that's just a shame because now he's not going to be able to work. So hopefully he recovers quick, but long road. So those of you who are waiting, not wanting to change your diet because you don't have enough money, no, you don't have the time to cook, you're going to have to make the change sooner or later. So I'll be here if you want to change now. If you don't want to change now, I'll wait, but it's going to be much harder later on. So that's where maybe a compromise would come in handy. And I just did a video on the DASH diet versus Mediterranean diet. This is not really a specific measurement practice, but it's just a lifestyle and a cooking style out of Spain, Greece, Italy that is very healthy, and it even includes wine. So wine, occasional meat, sweets even in the Mediterranean diet. But it is a practice, and it's totally opposite what the standard American diet or SAD diet is. But if this is, if diet or nutrition predominantly plays a role, like the study had shown, in adding to disease, specifically cancer, a good diet would probably help in not triggering you to turn over into cancer. If you're already into cancer, it will help. This will help more. And even though the studies are just on prostate cancer, I'd still say most cancers would benefit from a low-fat, vegetarian, plant-based diet. So if it doesn't resonate with you or it's too hard, then you have to get help from a nutritionist to teach you this stuff. Keith Block is an integrative oncologist in Evanston, Illinois. I've been to his place several times. Awesome place. I took 2 patients there. One of them has passed away, but she passed away with dignity. Actually 3 patients. The other 2 are doing okay, but still, it's nice when you go to a hematologist, oncologist office, and there's also in a big foyer a cooking show. There's also exercise and physical therapy. There's also a nutrition person that comes, not only in the cooking show, but also to make sure you're eating properly. So Block has a great example of many different foods, supplements to use, and other things that might help you on your road. And he likes to talk about food. So I like that because he points out what's not so obvious in studies. So again, if you can at least, whether you have a parent and you're trying to beat the possibility or you actually have disease, obesity contributes to a lot. So the first thing you could do, even if you don't do any of those diets, is to lose the weight. If you can lose the weight quickly, great, but you have to daisy chain after you lose it fast. You have to daisy chain what you're going to do after you do the fast detox. I like fasting mimicking diet. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But you can go fast and get stimulated and really get charged up. But some people can't maintain restrictive eating too long. So you'll always have to have a coach kind of design quick and then long-lived. Quick again and long-lived. So some would call that press pulse. And Tom Seifert came up with an idea of something called press pulse. And it essentially is maintaining a good, healthy diet and then aggressively changing so that you can essentially starve the cancer. And why starve the cancer? Because usually and that's the study Tom Seifert came up with. Press pulse is the idea, and I think it's a great idea. That kind of encompasses the fasting mimicking diet. But in the fasting mimicking diet or the longevity diet, which is Walter Longo's idea, I think this is easy. And if you're in the United States or if you're in Denmark or in Africa or in Canada, you can either get the box that he sells under the name of Prolon, and I'll put videos down below on my experience with Prolon, and it has worked great. It's a major lifestyle changer for me. Not only have I been able to trim the fat and lose weight, muscle bulk is increasing with the same exercise that I've ever done before. And I haven't changed anything else. And I think that if you look at the information that Longo came up with, and that's from Cell Metabolism, it essentially shows that you will be able to, number one, slow this guy down, push this guy into apoptosis and die. You also stimulate these guys to hunt better. So you kill those precancer cells, or those cells that are dependent on glucose as a metabolism source, as an energy source, and you give these guys more oomph or more gasoline to hunt these guys down. So that's what's so nice. And I think my interpretation of how this works best is you actually get into ketosis. The 5 days that you do to get into essentially 1,000 and then 750 calories, it will fool the body into thinking that it's in starvation mode. And if the body's in starvation mode and you're fat adapted, you actually will allow your cells to go into a little bit of hibernation, but you'll also get those cancer cells, which are usually very dependent on glucose. You get those cancer cells to kick over because you decrease their energy source, and you cause apoptosis or autophagy. And that's what's so cool about this diet. And it's easy. It's only 5 days. And this was specifically made to assist in chemotherapy for cancer patients in California. So reproducible evidence, it's a lot easier than doing water-only fast. And it's only 5 days. So most of the studies that show benefit, whether it's cancer, multiple sclerosis, I think he's doing studies now on Crohn's disease and Alzheimer's, or diabetes, it's usually 3 cycles, meaning 3 months, 5 days each month, and you watch and see. So I don't think it's much to ask. And again, if you can't afford the box, just put it together on your own and watch my video and I'll tell you how to calculate it. If you can afford the box, it's really easy, especially if you're a cancer patient. You don't want to deal with taste. I think most of the time if you're advanced cancer, you're taking chemotherapy, you lost the taste buds, or the pain is an issue. This is easy. It's just soup, low residual soup and a little bar and I think olives, but it's easy. So I'd say I love this for my cancer patients if they can adhere to it, which is easy, 5 days. And then after the 5 days, there's also information on what to do after the 5 days during the next 3 weeks until the next cycle. So easy to maintain, easy to initiate, a little pricey, but you can do it yourself, and very powerful results. Versus ketogenic diet. Now, Dom D'Agostino, this is not D'Agostino's book. I'm not sure if he wrote a book, but he has done many papers. And the idea with the ketogenic diet, or a well-formulated ketogenic diet, is to see if you can make the cells change and push over into death. Now, there's a classic approach to understanding the way cancer cells work, and it was first discovered by Otto Warburg. He studied cells that were cancerous and found that those cells usually had a very strong fuel source, a need for a fuel source, and it was always going to be glucose. In fact, when you get something called PET scans now to look at the entire body to find out where the cancer is hiding, you inject glucose into the patient, and it usually lights up. It's radioactive glucose. It lights up whatever it lights up, that's cancer, because it's being digested by the cancer cell pretty quick. That was evaluated first by Otto Warburg, and it's still understood as it works out today as being cancer cells like glucose. So, not all of them, but the majority of them. So the theory is if you can get those cancer cells to starve suddenly by doing ketosis, you might be able to push half of them over or have most of them initiate cell death, the programmed cell death. Now there's a study that I just came up with, or at least a review on ketosis, and it came up with the idea that it is tough to maintain the ketogenic diet. So it was about a 4-to-1 diet, but it is difficult. I tried it myself, and that's essentially all fat. So, for example, this is almond butter, and if you look at the label, there's 2 grams of sugar here, and mostly fat. I think it's 17 grams of fat, right? And then if you look at this one, this has less than 1 gram of sugar and 18 grams of fat. So this would be the idea, but the problem is when there's no sugar, nasty. It's like you're not eating anything. You're feeling with your tongue something buttery, but there's no taste to it. So that is the problem with sugar-free. But listen, if this is going to get you satiated and give you energy, I would say do it. So you just have to get used to making your own choices. But that is one of the problems. If you don't know how to calculate it on your own, getting into a ketosis is a little tricky. It takes about 6 weeks to do it, and you might think that you're calculating everything properly, but most people will make the mistake that when they get on a well-formulated ketogenic diet, protein will be in there somewhere, and protein initiates insulin response. When you have insulin response, you're not in ketosis. So it's either you're insulin responding and making insulin, or you're ketosis and you are using beta-hydroxybutyrate. So it's one or the other. So protein will do that too. Obviously, if you stay away from carbohydrates, and if I just lost you, you probably should get a nutritionist to calculate this stuff for you. I think MyFitnessPal can help you calculate it. If you just plug in your food sources, it'll spit out the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So you want proteins low, you want carbohydrates really low, and you want fats really high. That's essentially it. And that's where the Siegfried idea about press pulse would be useful, because if you can maintain, say, a ketogenic diet, and then you go into a pulse of a fasting mimicking diet, I think that will cause enough damage. You'll be able to save the good cells because they can use either fat or the ketones of fat or the glucose that you have available. They can survive both ways if you're fat adapted. It's a lot easier. If you're not fat adapted, you'll get there with your normal cells, but it'll be a little bit of a Herxheimer or a rough withdrawal period. So that's why I think it's always nice, even if you don't have cancer, to do a detox every once in a while. Let the body experience a little bit of starvation. Again, press pulse, and it culls the herd. Even if you don't have cancer, it'll cull the herd, but it'll make you ready for when you do get into a little bit of ketosis. I think it's very healthy. If you have cancer, definitely have to try that technique. So if you cannot tolerate a well-formulated ketogenic diet or can't figure one out, there is a cheat. If you just do a lot of fat, mostly fat, healthy fats, avocado, coconut, maybe a little bit of meat here and there, then you can sometimes actually take ketone salts. This is salt, I think I did a video on this, but these are salts that have bound up beta-hydroxybutyrate. I think it's over here. So if you take beta-hydroxybutyrate as a supplement 2 to 3 times a day, and you try your best with a well-formulated ketogenic diet, you should be able to turn down insulin and turn up ketosis or beta-hydroxybutyrate. The only way to really tell is by testing blood. Some machines are pretty accurate, but insulin's tough to test with a finger stick. So usually I'll have blood tested after about 3 days of doing the diet that you want, and I'll see what's the basic insulin level in the morning, what's the BHB level in the morning, and I'll see if you're doing it properly. So the only problem with this, just like the diet, if you're not ready for it or if you have IBS, the salts will get you irritated, might lead to diarrhea. And the mostly a fat diet, if you have IBS or don't tolerate it, at first your gut microbiota is going to say, hey, what's all this fat? We're just going to spit it out, and you have diarrhea, gas, bloatiness. But you usually will get used to that, and after the next couple of weeks, you should be adapted. So that, in a nutshell, is what I would suggest to anybody that's fighting, especially if you're late stage diagnosis. I think that it's important to understand what the data says out there. And even if you have pancreatic cancer, I think there's ways to utilize nutrition to your advantage. You know, if you are at the point where everything tastes bad and or you're having pain, say in pancreatic cancer, because it's always blocking up down here. It's blocking the way of food to go down. It's blocking the way of pancreatic enzymes to get into the small intestine. It's blocking the way of bile to get into the small intestine. And so if you're that bad, a little at a time, I might say once you build up a little more energy with, say, trying the fasting mimicking diet. I'd have to go to my favorite. This is what I would do. I do it already. And if I had cancer, I would do this. I would do this also. more aggressive, but I still keep it at 5 days a month. But the cool thing is that if you have blockage and it's difficult for you to swallow, the soups that are based in the Prolon box are spectacular. So they have low residual. You can eat them or drink them, drink your fuel source down and not have any, well, it's easy to get down. Maybe you take the bar and it's well dispersed over the course of a day, 5 days max, and then you're done. And then you've actually triggered stem cells to turn on. You've pushed over a lot of the borderline cells, the cancer cells, the precancer cells. You've killed them. And then when you refeed after the 5th day, you allow stem cells to take over, new cells, not cancerous, new cells, to take over and crowd out the cancer cells. And you also turn these guys on to go hunting. So I can't speak enough of this. Perhaps if you can't do the longevity diet between your 5 days a month, maybe you can take advantage of a mostly ketogenic diet. I think doing a partial ketogenic diet ain't gonna hurt. If you can get into this, that would be important. And then if you get to the point where you build up a little steam, you get some energy back, you help with sleep, then I might consider getting into chemotherapy. If you wanted to avoid chemotherapy because you're just not ready for it, I think that's fair. Once you get a little bit more stronger and you've taken advantage of cannabis, like I mentioned in my previous video, and maybe low-dose naltrexone at night, like I mentioned in the previous videos of that, I think you'll build up enough energy, get your sleep improved, start to feel a little better. You know the cancer is starting to die and you know the good cells are starting to pick up. Maybe you introduce chemotherapy. I think chemotherapy and dieting is going to eventually be what you have to get to, but right now if you're feeling pretty bad, then it's reasonable to wait. At the least, the Prolon box in the fasting mimicking diet is something that's easy. It's got low residual, it's easy to take. You just have to buy it from somebody in your area. It looks like this. So I've got 3 of them here. And this is one of them. So I got these on sale. So and this is how they look. So just check out the video I had before. So it's really easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 boxes, 5 days. Just take out 1 box per day. You go through it and it's no nonsense. So it's kind of a 5-day diet made for dummies. If it's too expensive, well, again, your health is worth it. But if it's too expensive, try to calculate it yourself. Low residual, 1,000 calories, 750, and maybe you can make it on your own. If you can't, then somebody can probably design it for you. So bottom line is try to lose the weight. If you're more towards the beginning of this and you're a family member, lose the weight, eat healthy, invest in your food, take time with your food, get rid of tobacco, be a little active. If you are more advanced, try Dean Ornish's mostly plant-based, low-fat diet. Still keep to avoidance, exercise more. If you're advanced, then I'd say hit it heavy. Again, if you have glioblastoma multiforme, that's where the work of Dominic D'Agostino came in handy. They were just using ketogenic diet, and they were showing improvement in GBM outcomes. So if the glioblastoma multiforme is dependent on glucose and you feed it fat, it doesn't know what to do with it, it dies. So I think that's a pretty good outcome. So why not try a little bit of it? And then again, if you want to do that, alternate that with a press pulse suggestion by Seaford. Do that 5 days, do that for 3 weeks. Do that for 5 days, do that for 3 weeks. I think it's the way to get into. So hopefully you can get to the point where this cancer cell dies, this white blood cell, these all white blood cells start to attack and hunt properly, and you've just done with nutrition, so you can slow this thing down. So if you have any successes with your type of diet, please put them in the comments down below. Otherwise, we'll be praying for you, and try to do some research. Don't get too kooky as far as way out there alternatives. I think acupuncture is good. I probably should do a video on that. But subscribe to me and stay tuned for the next follow-ups.